Hey guys, thanks for checking out my show MOLECAST. It's a show I do every Monday night at 9 p.m. Eastern over on my Twitch channel. So if you want to catch it live, make sure to head on over there and drop me a follow. Thanks for your support. Now let's get to it. Hey guys, welcome to MOLECAST, a podcast about World of Warcraft, content creation, and everything that happens in the in-between. I'm really glad to have UndadTV here tonight because we're going to talk about Mythic Plus, specifically in Shadowlands, because there's been just a lot of changes happening to this system. And I would say, it's probably one of the most popular systems that Blizzard has introduced into the game, since its creation. And so I figured we'd come and talk about it because there's been a lot of, obviously, hot topics and discussions and opinions that have been, revolving around Mythic Plus. So I don't know. I want to get some thoughts on it specifically from you because I know, one, you've done a lot of Mythic Plus in retail and have done high keys as well as competed on like a professional, semi-professional level. Have you? Because I know you did. I know you guys were looking at doing
great news, everyone.
I played in all three seasons of MDI. We competed. I think I missed one cup.
Okay.
Where we were like reforming roster because that's the way it goes when you're a mid-tier team. You just play with different people every time you play. You don't have like a solid team. But I think we missed one cup. Otherwise, we lost a lot of games, but we played in all of them.
Okay, sick. Yeah, I knew that you had competed at like a high level. I just wasn't sure like how many of the tournaments you had actually done, MDIs, and it's Keystone Masters. Keystone Masters is it's not international competition, but it is in Europe and NA at the same time. Is that how they do that?
Yes, it is. It is. Okay. That's set up by Sierra is the head of that. That's like a total community run. He started. Sierra was the healer on the team that won the Legion MDI. The end of Legion MDI, Sierra was on. That was some of the guys that are on Perplex now. For anybody who's familiar, who's like the number 2 team in Europe. Yeah. Sierra was the healer for what is the core Perplex now. He took a step back from that, and now he's just formed this as like a Blizzard. Can we get tournament realm access so we can make our own tournament? Like that would be sick. Yeah. And so he's doing that now. And there's another one coming up pretty soon. Signups just ended today, actually. Okay. There's gonna be like a end of expansion hurrah that I won't be competing in, but I'm going to be doing a little bit of casting for that tournament this time. Yeah,
I was excited to hear you're going to be an analyst and help kind of dissecting some of the strategies and games and stuff, which is awesome. So, well, let's just jump into the discussion tonight and talk, it's like just right into Shadowlands because I think that's kind of like where the majority of people, what people are looking for right now because retail's kind of in a weird spot where everyone's pushing these like mega high keys, it's like, oh, you're trash if you're like less than 4K or something.
To me, man, BFA is just done. I've moved on completely. I'm not logging into that. Like beta is as far as I'm concerned, that is my main game right now. I don't even do my weekly keys anymore. I haven't done a world quest in like 2 months. That's over for me. So,
dude, same. Like I had like a push on my rogue and then I was leveling some, an alt and trying to level some alts and just prepare for Shadowlands a little bit. And I actually like did a vision for the first time in like forever the other day. And I was like, God, I'm so over this,
Yeah.
So I'm like, how much have I grinded this system? Okay, so let's talk about the dungeons in Shadowlands because there's let me think. There's 8 dungeons out right now. Is that correct?
That's right.
Okay, yep. So overall, your impressions of these dungeons, like in terms of design, because and I want to constantly compare them to BFA Dungeons because I will say if there's one thing that I felt like BFA did like semi well is a lot of the dungeons were designed pretty good, like they were decent, right? So, let's talk about that. Like, what dungeons have you experienced in Shadowlands that feels like super good?
I want to talk about the BFA dungeons just for a second.
Sure.
If you don't mind. That I think this season showed that the dungeons were actually pretty good. It was just the layouts and not having natural skips for certain parts of dungeons that made them feel frustrating for the first few seasons. And now that we've introduced Awakened and you just have like a free reign to like actually skip what you want, the dungeons themselves are good. Like they're good dungeons. The packs are good. They're engaging for multiple people. So I think they made a big mistake in BFA by like these bottleneck spots where you can't skip stuff and attaching like stealth C to too many mobs, which seems like they've moved away from at least a bit in Shadowlands. And I think BFA also required like a lot of count in dungeons. Like you kind of like slogged through, and eventually after like 15, 20 pulls, it was like, okay, we're done with count now. We can fight the bosses.
Yeah.
And that's something that while Shadowlands dungeons, which I'll touch on a little bit, seem quite linear, you don't go over count as crazily as you did in BFA if you don't skip stuff. Like we get into the habit of like, okay, we could skip this here. Like let's shroud this, and then we get to the end of dungeon and we don't have enough count. So they like set it up so you actually get a proper amount in the dungeons, and they're all like beautiful to look at so far. Do you want me to talk about like specific dungeons and get into that, or just like general?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think that's interesting that like some of those points you're talking about, especially the Awakened affix, like how the Awakened affix changed how everyone approached, Mythic Plus. Because like specifically a lot of the feedback that I've seen, at least on other podcasts and from some other content creators, is it tends to like people really like the open design to Mythic to dungeons. Like they really love like Freehold. They like Junkyard, like these designs of dungeons that allow you to kind of make decisions and create your own pathing versus like very linear, like the typical King's Rest, maybe Workshop or Underrot, something like that, where it has this very linear like path that you have to take in order to time the key. And then obviously the Awakened affix is like setting the bar very high for new affixes that they're going to introduce, just simply because it one solved a huge problem with how rogue stream.
Oh yeah,
talking about it, but how rogues were so demanded for every single group because of Shroud, which I think they're potentially, kind of gonna have to solve that problem again, come Shadowlands, with what you're saying. Although maybe not if you're saying the count is so strict, right? Because if like how much can you skip with Shroud in Shadowlands?
It's dungeon specific, but there's certainly a lot of places where it's maybe 1 to 2 packs. If you skip, you can still get your count, and if you try to do more than that, you're going to end up short in a lot of the dungeons. And obviously it's a little bit difficult for us to fine tune routes until we have like a functioning MDT. Like we're kind of still learning dungeons. Some of them don't work yet. Like Plaguefall and Spires are dungeons you don't really do of the 8 dungeons because they're not fully functioning. Like the last boss in Spires is just like not killable unless you do some real weird immunity cheese. Basically he has like an ability that kills you if you're not in a shield, and in the second phase he no longer spawns the shield anymore, so he kills you. So we're not really doing Spires, so there's not a lot of testing going on there. But your point about the Awakened affix and them having a hard time making an affix that is going to compare to that, I think that they've done it. I think that Prideful, I'm more excited about than I've been for any of their seasonal affixes. And it's a good thing because you also mentioned them being linear, a lot of the dungeons being linear and people not liking that so much. I think that a lot of the Shadowlands dungeons do fall into that relatively linear state. There's not a lot of openness and choice with similar to Freehold or a dungeon like a Taldazar, where you can go different directions at the start and end up at the same end with how you path. But the addition of Prideful is like very good, and that's like where the strategy will come from, is when you proc your Prideful, when you fight your Prideful, and what you use your Prideful buff to then fight. Because you get a buff when you kill the Prideful mob that gives you 30% damage, 60% move speed, and your healer regens 5% mana a second for the next minute. So it's basically like you have like an extra bloodlust every time you fight one of those mobs.
So conceptually,
so that's going to be the strategy.
Like conceptually, you fill up a bar, right? Or like how does this?
It's 20%. It's reaping, but you get a benefit for. It's like if you killed reaping mobs and then you got a buff after you killed all the reaping mobs.
Oh, gotcha.
Is effectively how it works.
All right.
So it spawns like a little boss mob that you have to kill.
Yeah. Okay. Gotcha. Well, that sounds really interesting, because then that is very strategic in nature, that it's not just like a random proc, So, that's good for sure. So like, I mean, I agree with you. I mean, I would have looked at some of them today, some of the dungeons today. I thought it was really interesting. I mean, the art team, dude, is carrying Shadowlands.
Oh yeah,
they're hard.
I love being in every dungeon. Like, there's not a dungeon. There's one section of one dungeon I don't like being in, and that's it. The rest of them, I'm just like, I'm super happy that I'm here.
Yeah.
I don't really care what's going on. My character looks cool. I'm in this place that looks cool, and just like having a generally good time.
What's the one you don't like? I want to hear.
So there's there's the other side has 3 wings to it, and there is the like what I've been calling the garden wing, which is like Night Fae-esque.
Yeah.
There is Hakar's wing. There's like an extra. I don't know how Hakar has been a boss across like 4 different expansions now, but Hakar has a wing again, and he's back, I guess. So
he's like the blood god bird thing, right?
Yes. Yeah. He's just every other expansion he shows up somehow.
Yeah.
And then there's Millhouse and Maleficent Mana Storm's wing, and that wing I don't ever want to be in
because that's workshop basically, isn't it?
It's like kind of there's these mobs that they put these mobs in, I guess, assuming that no melee play the game anymore. They spin their tops and they cast this spinning ability.
Okay.
That, like, granted you can stun, but there's 4 of them in both packs you pull, and when you hit them, they get knocked back. So you have to like stack on your tank and then hope that your ranged are also stacked on your tank so they get knocked the same direction.
Yeah.
Otherwise, they just pinball between the tank and the melee, and you just get cranked by the spell that they're casting. So, and it's a tight corridor too, but I think they'll figure that out, and that'll be not as bad as it is right now. But everything else, I've loved being there in all the dungeons.
Nice. I mean, that's good to hear though. Like, I mean, I've been watching some of the people stream and you know, some of the videos on YouTube of the dungeons, and they just look beautiful. I actually think it's interesting because the what's that one called? The Way, or it's the one with Blom Samdi in it. The one you just
The other side.
The other side. Thank you. It's kind of interesting how they have these 3 different wings that all represent like different. It's totally different. Like, it's not like you enter one theme. It's like every wing is like a totally different theme. So I don't know. I found that very very interesting. And then I actually thought the troll boss and the big guy that you fight looked like a pretty interesting fight. I don't know what his name is.
He will be. I don't know his name either.
Mozela or something like that.
Something like that.
Yeah,
I think that's it. Mozela.
He's
he'll be interesting. He'll actually be cool on high keys, I think.
Yeah.
I think all the bosses, actually, the saving grace of this, like, Mythic Plus in Shadowlands, if it turns out the dungeons are not as fun because they're linear, is every boss is good.
Yeah.
Every boss has like iconic abilities, and they've shifted into making bosses do abilities at % HP in a lot of places instead of just on a timer. So imagine if you only had to do 2 tantrums on Kragmaw, right?
Yeah.
Like if Kragmaw tantrumed at 66% and 33% instead of just on a timer, that boss would be infinitely better.
Yeah.
Right? You could like set up your cooldowns. Like, I have this here. I have this here. We could wait on a push if we're too fast and we don't have everything we need back.
Yeah.
So a lot of the bosses are set up in that way, which I think is going to be, that will be like the redeeming quality that makes these dungeons really good. Is that all
and
the
that
bosses
fixes
are gonna be fun to play.
tyrannical issues, right?
To an extent, I think. I still think the big issue with tyrannical is how much longer it takes. Like,
Yeah.
Boss is just taking a lot longer.
Sure.
So people won't. You probably won't see the highest keys done tyrannical, but you'll still see them played, right? Like, it won't be punishing enough that it's like, I don't want to play this week. It'll just be punishing enough that, like, all right, I'm not getting score this week.
Yeah,
but
I got
it's still a good time.
Yeah. And Fat Joey in chat, I will say we would, if you guys have questions, we'll take some questions at the end of the show if we have time. So save some of those juicy questions for later, and we'll definitely get into that later on. I'm sure we'll talk about covenants tonight too. So, but yeah, I mean, I was really like after seeing some of the videos of some of the boss fights and everything, I thought it looked really interesting. The one thing that I think is really curious to me about some of the design is that it seems like, for whatever reason, they designed a lot of platforms. That was one thing that I noticed is specifically like in Necro. Is it crap? Not Necro Lord. What's the Necro Lord dungeon?
In theater, there's theater and Plaguefall, I guess.
Plaguefall.
The two
yeah, in Plaguefall, there's this boss that jumps from platform to platform.
Oh yeah.
and then you go to Torghast, and there's like multiple sections in Torghast where you have like all these platforms.
Yeah.
And then also in the other side, when you're fighting that troll boss, you take
There's
portals
multiple
to these other platforms.
Yeah.
I'm like, why do they have so many platforms?
It's like they figured out the tech to make it real clean, and they were like, dude, we gotta put this in the dungeons. This
let's
is
throw
so
it in
sick.
every dungeon. Every single
in
one.
Spires too. There's not as much content on Spires because, like I said, it's bugged. But even in there's a lot of like just RP flying from platform to platform through the sky, which I mean is obviously, I guess you could consider boring, or people are gonna be like, man, this is gonna slow the key down, but like they're just gonna balance the timer around it. So it's like it's just like included in what the timer is. So it doesn't, at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter.
But I mean, and there's just a lot of really, I mean, I'm excited because there's just a lot of cool, I would just say polish. Like, I think the dungeons have some very small, unique elements to them that seem polished. Like, for example, in Halls of Atonement, I think it's like the second boss in Halls of Atonement, where he comes and bursts through the door.
Oh, yeah.
And it like throws you backwards. Like, I was like, that's such a small thing that's really cool. You know, like
you activate them by clicking on it, and then you're really happy about it as long as you're not playing tank. If you're playing tank, you hate it because you got to go click on it and taunt him quick before he knocks you back and beats the crap out of your melee.
Yeah, and then the boss where the floor opens up and you like, and then it closes. Just some really cool animation elements and stuff there that's like just really like polished and kind of a level up from what they have been doing. You know, at least recently, at least new stuff that we're seeing that looks really, really cool, in my opinion, at least. So, you know, I'm encouraged to see some of that. In terms of balance, you know, within Mythic Plus, you know, let's just jump into it. How is it feeling? Obviously, it's beta, and people have differences of opinion. And I actually received a little bit of flack in one of the episodes that I did because we talked about how, like, completely off everything is in beta right now, where it just feels like so far removed from anything that could remotely go live that it's hard to get kind of a pulse on how things are. You know, and there's this discussion right now about, well, it's just to see how it feels, which I totally understand.
Yeah.
You know, especially if you're talking about classes, right? Like if you're talking about just what class feels good to play. But there's also an element here where we're trying to get a feeling for like what the actual Shadowlands is going to be like. And it is hard to get like a general meta understanding, not meta, I don't want to use that term, but this broader understanding of power ranges, because balance has been an issue, specifically with corruption in 8.3. How are things feeling? Like, is it just way on polar spectrums, or is it somewhat balanced, or how's it going?
I think it's difficult to say, and it's going to become increasingly difficult to say until they wipe characters again, because as of yesterday and the day before, some of the sweatier players on beta have solved that you can go back and craft gear from previous expansions.
I saw that.
That have 2 to 3 sockets in them.
Yeah.
Effectively wearing 3 characters worth of gear, because it all scales up. As long as it's like a specific item level, it'll just scale up when you go to do the content that you're doing. So you have this item that has 3 sockets in it, but it's item level 215, which is heroic item level from the raid.
Yeah.
So there's like no way. Like we did a dungeon last night. We did halls on +20 last night.
Okay.
And I'm in there on just a fully template character. Like my character is just, I made him, and then that's it. Because I have all these different rogues made, because we'll get into it when we talk about covenants and conduits, but I have 7 rogues made on beta for the purpose of testing everything.
Yeah.
But so we're in this dungeon. I'm full template. So I have a gauge for like, okay, my character at 215 item level, I'll probably do like about this much damage. I'll contribute this to the group. This is what I can expect like to do in a +20 during heroic week.
Yeah.
And then I'm playing with Zyronic, and Zyronic has 22 sockets on his gear.
Oh my god.
It's just like, man, like how am I supposed to like have any idea how strong Warlock is? Like I just like there's no way for me to even know.
Yeah.
But I guess previous to that, I did do plenty of keys previous to the past 2 days. And it feels like you're definitely going to favor uncapped classes, which I think everybody that plays Mythic Plus kind of expected. I don't know what the developers thought was going to happen. Like we magically just like weren't going to try to pull as much as we could, because it's just the fastest way to do dungeons. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So there will certainly be niches for some melee classes. Things like Rogue are just going to have their niche.
Yeah.
And Holy is uncapped in some ways still. Frost Decay is uncapped in some ways. But most of the melee specs are just capped. So maybe when we get to the hierarchies, we'll have to pull smaller. Like we're already kind of getting there. We did like a bigger mists last night. And there've been a bunch of clips of the end of mists. There's all these bugs and just pulling like a bazillion of them and AoE it all down. And as we're getting to the higher keys and attaching fortified to the keys, it's like, well, these dungeons these mobs just kill you. Like you can't you can't pull that many anymore.
Yeah.
So I guess I think that's their idea, and that's what they want to do. They want to tune the dungeons in a way where you're limited. Your pulls are limited because you die, not because your characters are capped. And then the capped characters end up existing okay in those dungeons. So we'll see how it plays out. I think MDI, it's definitely going to be a big issue.
Yeah.
That you'll play just mostly uncapped classes, but I'm happy if they move away from tuning for MDI. I don't think them tuning for MDI is ever. I think they should just leave that alone, and whatever the top players at the highest level do to break the game for a speed run tournament, you just let them do it. As long as the game functions well in the live version of the game, I don't see a point in them looking to that. So I am very nervous, but hopeful, I guess is how I would put it. It has potential to be really bad, but if it works out, it'll be fine.
Yeah. I wondered if they did, like, because we've talked about the AoE cap, and I have a tweet we'll pull up here by THD in a second that I do want to talk about, because I thought that it was, like, exceptionally interesting. But this idea of why they introduced this AoE cap, which, you know, all the nerds will rage right now and say it's not AoE cap, it's actually cleave cap, because there are a lot of, like, AoE abilities that are uncapped, right? So let's dig into that a little bit more. Like, so like what kind of things are they capping? Like, obviously, like Blade Flurry on Rogue, since this is Rogue stream, Blade Flurry is obviously capped to a certain amount of ads or whatever.
Correct.
Now, what about like Hunter? And
most of Hunter, from what I understand, is capped. Aside from, I want to say Marksman Volley, the Tar Trap Legendary. And that might be it. But right now, the Tar Trap Legendary is just like hard carrying Hunter. So it's really, really difficult to tell what Hunter's even going to do because the Legendary is so overtuned. But specifically Rogue, there is one singular thing that is uncapped for Rogue. Yeah. And it is the second hit of Secret Technique, which is the talent for Subtlety. Every other Rogue ability is capped.
Yeah.
And they're capped at arbitrary different amounts, right? So like Outlaw caps at 5. Oh, sorry. There's two things. Outlaw can take Blade Rush, and Blade Rush is uncapped.
Blade Rush is uncapped.
Blade Rush is uncapped, but nobody's playing Blade Rush because you take Dancing. Dancing Steel is just superior, even with Blade Rush being uncapped.
Yeah, yeah.
So, and it's all at different levels. Like, Blade Flurry is capped at 5, both the initial hit and like your flurry. So you hit your target and then you flurry 4 additional targets.
Okay.
Phantom Knives and Crimson Tempest for assassination are capped at 8. Both of those are not reflected in the tooltip. They're just, you had to play it to find out. Like it says in the tooltip, it says hits all targets.
Yeah, yeah.
And then
super scuffed,
Phantom Knives or you Crimson Tempest and 8 bleeds go out instead of however many mobs you're fighting.
Yeah.
Which is a little bit less of an issue for assassination because you're hitting Phantom Knives and Crimson Tempest and they function as dots so often, you end up poisoning everything anyway.
Yeah.
Even though you're capped. So less of an issue there. And then Subtlety, Shuriken Storm and Shadow Vault are capped at 8. And Secret Tech, the initial hit is capped at 6. And the second hit is uncapped. So Sub just hits random amounts of targets. And that most of the melee are capped around 5 or 6 for most of their abilities.
Yeah.
Seemingly forgetting about DK. Like DK, for whatever reason, is uncapped in a lot of places.
Do you think it's reasonable to assume that they capped a lot of things with these melee classes specifically because they wanted to see more range classes included in dungeons?
I don't know. I hear that pretty often.
Yeah.
From people saying like, this is how you get ranged into dungeons. You give melee the utility and like the shorter kicks and the stuns and stuff, and you give the damage to range. And I think in theory, maybe it works. Maybe that was their idea of why they did it. But at the same time, the majority of the people that play the game at like a high level PvE content, like, are playing for raid, not Mythic Plus.
Yeah.
So you know what I mean? Like it feels like an awkward thing for them to have done without taking into account that like melee is already garbage in raid when you compare it to raid. You know what I mean? So it's
it's like highly competitive. Like if you want to get into a raid, you play a range class. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah. If you otherwise you have to battle for your melee spot. Like it's like even in like middling tier guilds or guilds that are just heroic guilds. Like even for them, because the heroic bosses are so much more punishing for melee than ranged also. So it's just you usually get spots, but you definitely don't have as easy of a time.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think that's interesting that this is the approach they're taking on some of this stuff. You know, another interesting topic. Let's jump to this tweet here. I'll pull it up. It's a tweet by THD Lock, and basically what it says is a perfect example why AoE capping is bad. Check out the poor Rep Paladin. Isn't it super great? He can't do any damage, and no, the answer is not cap everything. Let the pulls happen and attempt to balance. Which I actually I like kind of that idea.
Control.
Well, let's see how long this is. I'll just pull it up here.
You call kicks?
So they do this pull, and if you notice the the meters on the side.
Oh yeah, I know this exact pull.
Yeah. So look at this. I mean, first of all, this is a massive pull. Like.
Yeah. These mobs are now changed in a lot of ways, by the way. So this pull is like very difficult now.
Okay.
This was a lot easier in a previous build.
Okay. And then you have the pally just, I mean, immediately drop. Like he's doing nothing. Like he's just barely
and the
above
DKs
the
just
healer.
kill the whole pack. Yep.
Yeah.
Who else is coming in?
So anyway, I mean, that kind of just like shows kind of what we're talking about how he's like barely out DPSing the healer here, which is also a holy pally.
It just seems very, I don't know. It's a really weird change to me because a target cap exists in the game already, right? Like a target cap exists at 20, and all your damage square roots from then on, across all classes, all specs, like that happens. So then, I could understand them wanting to lower the cap, but then they chose to lower the cap, but that didn't add in the square rooting effect, where like you still will hit all the mobs. You know what I mean? Like I don't think the frustration is that I'm doing so much less damage. I mean, in that case, it probably is, but I don't think the frustration.
I mean, that
is
rep
so
pally
much
doesn't feel that way, right?
Yeah. I don't know that it's so much specifically that more than it is like I'm fighting 9 targets, but I'm only hitting 6. Yeah. Like I would rather do less damage to each target past 6, but still hit all 9 targets than I'm specifically hitting 6 random targets in this pack, and I might not be hitting the ones that I want to for damage. You know, it's just like a weird that they didn't include the square rooting in.
Like Rep Paladins and Windwalker monks were like, oh my god, we finally get something when they announce that you like have all these options to choose from. Can Windwalker monks take Way of the Crane now?
I don't think they don't get Way of the Crane. They have a new talent that's the Azurite trait that they used to have, where they proc free spinning crane kicks.
Oh,
so they get just like a free cast of spinning crane kick that does more damage.
Okay. So I mean, they were finally like, oh my god, we're not going to be in the gutter anymore, and then they're like, wait a second.
And then they capped all these specs.
Yeah. So it's like, oh. Bummer.
And it wouldn't be an issue if on 5 targets melee was just better, right? Because then it's like, okay, past 5 targets melee is worse than these range specs, but up until 5 melee owns because they're capped. But it's just not the case right now. So if we get there, maybe Rogue is an outlier. Rogue's abusing some beneficial bugs right now to do a lot of damage.
Okay.
But like the initial hit from Blade Flurry is also Blade Flurrying. Yeah. So they're just doing triple damage every time they hit Blade Flurry. So we'll see what happens when that issue's fixed. But yeah.
So it's just kind of hard to see how this is going to play out right now because it's not. I mean, everyone is kind of assuming that it's not going to go live like this, right?
I would be surprised if it's changed by live. I would be surprised to see the capping changed. I think the capping's going to go live. I think it's more likely that Covenant and Conduit stuff changes before release than the capping. I think it's like a core. Like I think they're more likely to back off on systems than they are on gameplay mechanics typically. Especially without seeing them in a competitive scene. There may be a situation where we get to Sun King in the Mythic race, which is one of the bosses in Castle Nathria, the notorious AoE boss. Yeah. And they see that you're literally just bringing Warlocks and Moonkins, and that's it for all the top guilds. And then they're like, okay, maybe we have to backpedal on this a little bit.
I heard about that. It's like, hey, here, we're going to introduce an AoE cap or cleave cap, whatever the heck you want to call it.
Yeah, and then
and then here's this boss with all of these ads. Like, what the?
Yeah.
Are you kidding me?
Mm-hmm.
Like, so that's funny. Well, here I want to jump back to this tweet real quick because there's an interesting comment that occurred here. Looking at this by this guy named Methylene, because this is Limit THD Lock, who's plays Warlock for Complexity Limit, World First Guild. And something that's interesting, is he's talking, like, he basically is talking about the reason for this cap and, like, kind of the philosophy behind it. And then this guy basically comments and says, again, this has nothing to do with balance or even the damage it does. It's purely to help the engine stop dying. And then they go into this argument, and props to THD Lock because, he makes this point about, they do some nerd stuff and talk about calculation, and then he talks about incorrect. You should look into how algorithmic complexity works. You are comparing a flat 5% calculation with a system that falls apart because it suffers from exponential growth, which basically I'm going to very simplify this, and I could be totally wrong, but later on in the discussion, THD Lock is like looking at this guy's bio. He's a software engineer, works in Silicon Valley, and he's talking about the limitations of like what World of Warcraft is built on. The engine that World of Warcraft is built on has massive problems whenever it runs into like exponential server return, essentially, is my understanding, which could be wrong, but essentially it's like when you have all of these ads and you have multiple ticking damage, dots, crits, whatever, like ticking damage that hits it. It has to return all that information to the server. So when you add 5 people, when you add 30 people, whatever, it completely destroys the engine that, the game is built on. So I thought that was like a really interesting point, because I think everyone right now is obviously looking at this AoE cap and saying, like, why? Like, why would Blizzard choose to make this change when they're not directly going to come out and say it's a system issue, not a design decision, right?
I wish they would.
I mean, I wish they would too.
All right, cool, man. Like, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Great. The servers are falling apart. Fine. At least we understand. Now just raise the cap to 10 and we're chilling. Like, whatever, dude.
Yeah. And I agree with you. Like, I wish that they would be transparent with that, but I could totally see this, like a CEO kind of looking at that, or trying to save face on this idea of like, you're paying for this game and we want to have like a polished game, but literally there's a technical issue here with how things have been designed and how the game has evolved, because it obviously didn't used to be like this, and it was a big change an adjustment for me when I came back to the game, because I hadn't played since the end of WoD, and even then that was like barely the beginning of when they introduced like timed dungeon runs, like
with challenge modes.
Yes, with challenge modes. And I remember almost nobody did it. Like, nobody did it. Like,
that was something I wish I had done, but was still playing at like too low a level. Like, I wasn't really playing the game at a high level until maybe middle of Legion.
Yeah,
I would just like log on, maybe clear heroic eventually by the end of the tier, get my AOTC was my goal, and then like when Legion hit, I was like, all right, I want to push for like cutting edge and do like the real hard stuff. Like, that's what I want to play now. But yeah.
I mean, so I think that's an interesting thing, because I saw that tweet and I was like, wow, this is a really interesting discussion that's happening right now, because this could be an underlying reason that they're not willing to discuss or talk about, simply because, they could see that as a negative view of the game,
Yeah.
But
it's catch-22.
It is. But then you also have to look at like Diablo and stuff. Like, somehow they manage Diablo, which is like literally just run around and pull as much crap as you can, right?
Yeah.
Like, so I don't know. Maybe it's built on something different. I'm not sure, but
I don't know. I'm not even gonna pretend like I have any idea how any of that works. Like, I have no clue. I just like, it's like on one hand they come out and they say it's a system thing, and everybody's like, what the heck? It's 2020. Why can't you make your servers work?
Yeah.
And on the other hand, they don't come out and say that, and everybody's like, do any of your developers have any idea what is fun? Like, there's no like,
it's a lose-lose for them, right?
Yeah, there's nothing they could say that's good. So
yeah,
just the way it is right now.
Yeah. But anyway, I just found that super interesting that was, a discussion that came out about it, is like that maybe there is an underlying issue here, that some of us probably aren't thinking about. Not to give that an excuse, but I found that very interesting.
Yeah.
So, okay, so let's jump back
we'll never know.
Let's jump back into some of these, some of these systems, particularly, covenants, conduits. Like, we could probably talk about that for a long time. you know, where do you want to start? What's your initial feeling of that? Obviously, you have 7 rogues, so there's issues.
Well, I am of the opinion that if they put something in the game in some way that covenants were unlocked, or like you just unlock the abilities of other covenants later on, I think they could have a lot more fun with designing and balancing the abilities. Like my big issue is not about performance. It's not about optimization. It's not about like, what if I choose the wrong covenant? Like, I'm personally not worried about that. I am worried about the removal of fun, in that I get most of my fun from trying random things. You know what I mean? Like, most of my fun is I want to play an off spec and figure out how to make an off spec work, or I want to play like a meta spec but do some weird things with my talents or whatever my loadout is, and see if I can get a benefit or a gain with that. And both parts of the system, both covenants and conduits, just don't let anybody do that. And it also forces them to make the abilities less engaging, I think, because they're so worried about making sure that they're balanced for the general community that there's no room to like let stuff be OP, right? Like, if you could swap, or if you had like a reachable goal where if you grinded enough in the game, you could unlock another covenant's ability.
Sure.
If for some reason yours got undertuned and another one was like overpowered for a patch, you just grind to get it, and then you could have the satisfaction of playing with this overtuned ability, instead of just, well, I'm a Necrolord and they ruined Bone Spike and they made Slaughter Poison nuts, and now I'm a Necrolord. That's just, here I am. You know what I mean? Like, I think it limits their design space. I think they put themselves in a hole where they could have opened up their design space and made these abilities super cool and super impactful, and just let us do like nuts things. But now they can't, because they put a lock on things. So
yeah, and there's kind of like this weird, I don't know what to call it. There's kind of like this weird dynamic between this RPG and I want to compare it to MOBAs, because I think MOBAs do this really well, where it's super fun. It's obviously a totally different game, but
sure,
specifically with Mythic Plus, I think Mythic Plus, maybe Arena as well, there are these systems where you can play a lot around with things. Obviously, I mean, you could do that with raid.
Yeah, definitely.
You could do that with raiding, I guess, as well. It's just not quite as fluid. But this idea of like, you know, from game to game, changing up your layout to see kind of like what you're talking about, have unique play styles, this kind of stuff. Because MOBAs allow you to do that, where you can build just completely off the wall stuff, and they intentionally are trying to break a design to figure out this puzzle, right? To see what's good, what's not good, etc. Right? And the meta changes, you know, like, and when I look back at like other things, one of the first things that comes to my mind was when Shadowlands was really strong back in Wrath of the Lich King. And everyone played like this weird hybrid Shadowlands Pally spec in Arena in Wrath of the Lich King. And it was like, I don't think it was an intended thing, but it was something somebody figured out. And that's fun. Like you talk about, like that's like an element of fun in the game. And it seems like there's this, they're totally prohibiting anything like that now.
Yeah, I always say that the content that Blizzard makes has never ever lacked. Like, it's the what you actually do in the game has always been amazing.
Sure.
It's typically the systems that they create that prevent you from doing those things in the game that are like the frustrating parts. You know what I mean? Like, they create systems, which I get, like they're in this the way they do their expansions now, they're under this pressure to create some new thing that defines the expansion, and they want it to feel impactful, and they want it to not just be like something that you grind out in the first week and then you just go about playing the game. But I don't know. I don't think the locks are the move, I guess, because I want to try all the covenants. They're all sick, especially as they like right now. Rogue definitely has some issues, and most of my experiences could come from Rogue. I played a few other classes, some other melees, and some tanks, but mostly from Rogue. There's just, I don't know if they're going to fix all the Covenant abilities by the time live happens.
Yeah.
And then if they don't, and you choose the one or the two that like work properly and are reasonable to play if you're trying to play at a high level, and then somewhere during the patch they tune so one of the abilities that didn't quite work is really cool and like is good now. It's just like, man, like, I don't want to be punished for wanting to go play that. Like, I want to just try the neat stuff. Like, you know what I mean? Like, you have to play the game.
You have this whole expansion that you're giving us, and you're not even letting us play it, right?
Yeah. I think that's I think that they will open them up eventually.
Yeah.
I obviously hope that they do it before the first patch, but I don't. I think first patch we're going to be stuck. I think we're going to be whatever Ian's grand design is for how covenants are supposed to work.
Yeah.
I think we're getting for patch, I guess it'll be 9.0, 10.0. What are we at now?
Yeah.
It's 9.0. I think we will be there. And then when 9.1 happens, I think they'll let some stuff open up. I think the first thing to open up will be conduits, which we haven't really talked about yet.
Yeah.
So currently, you can only swap the conduits in your slots within your soulbind tree once a week. Okay. And their idea behind this not being an issue is that you have 3 soulbinds, so you can do 1 for each spec.
Mm-hmm.
The issue becomes that, first of all, getting your next soulbinds is time gated behind like progressing the campaign. So at the beginning of the expansion, it's going to feel bad.
And soulbinds
eventually
are like,
you'll get them.
Soulbinds are like utility, defensive, and healing based, right?
Yeah. So there's 3 different kinds of conduits. There's potency, which is damage.
Okay.
There's endurance, which is defensive conduits, and then there's finesse, which are like general utility conduits.
Okay.
But the way the soulbinds are set up is, so for example, on Necrolord, the first 2 soulbinds, the one is Plague Master something, and the other one is Imani, who is like a stitchwork that you build. Mm-hmm. And if you want to play 3 potency conduits, because the trees are set up in a way where I have to go this direction to hit my 3 potencies, or I can take 2 potencies and get an extra defensive, whatever. Most throughput situations, you're going to want to go 3 potencies.
Okay.
So for Plague Master, if you go 3 potencies, you cannot get an endurance conduit. You have to play a finesse. So 3 potency and a finesse. And then on Imani, if you want to be able to cast Fleshcraft while you move, which is like why you play Imani. That's,
yeah.
I don't know how much sense it'll make to everybody, but basically, if you're playing Imani, you are playing that talent. That is like the best part of it. You can't take a finesse. You are forced into 3 potency and an endurance. So,
and that's the way the talent. That's the way the talent tree is set up, correct?
Correct. Yeah. That you have no control over, basically. Yeah. So the idea that you can just swap your soulbinds around to cover your other specs is like, I get it, but whatever my main spec is, I'm going to have 2 soulbinds for, because I'm going to have one that wants a finesse and one that wants a potency, which means I'll have 1 spec I can play on the offside, but I won't be able to play all 3 specs. And that, for me at least, I don't know if that ruins things for other players, but for me, that ruins Rogue. I want to play all 3 specs. That's when I get the most joy out of the game.
Yeah.
That's why I play the class that I play. I enjoy all 3 specs. I want to be able to play all 3 specs. And having to wait a week to be able to swap my stuff around to play other specs is just, I don't know. It almost feels like if you ever accidentally clicked the wrong Azurite trait, and then they were like, well,
too bad.
I'll see you Tuesday.
Yeah. And
then you get to swap it again. It's like minor inconvenience, obviously, like especially if it was a utility trait, like kind of whatever, but still doesn't feel good, I guess. So I think that'll open up. That will probably open up in the first patch, if I were to guess.
Oh man, dude, like just listening to this is like giving me anxiety, because I'm sitting here thinking,
like, what if you put the wrong thing in?
Well, I'm sitting here thinking about also like, okay, like at least in BFA you could farm extra Azurite gear, you know?
Sure, yeah.
So I had an assassination set and an outlaw set, and I farmed it because I wanted to play both. It was like, you know, I wanted, when I went into raids, I wanted assassination for single target, and when I went into certain boss fights, I wanted outlaw because I want to optimize, you know. And I actually farmed out single target outlaw as well, and then found out it was complete garbage. But but like there, like at least like this is almost like a worse system than what it was in BFA, because there is no flexibility. There is no additional farming you can do to play an additional spec during the week. It's a 7-day lockout and that's it. So, and that's why people are talking about having multiple characters, or you have a raid character and you have a different character for Mythic Plus, and you have, you know, maybe an arena character, and it's just like,
I don't think it's going to go that far. I think it's more so you're just going to play one character and be kind of sad. I don't think it's going to be I don't think it's going to be maybe for like world first guilds in the top 5 to 10 world, maybe there'll be multiple characters, but I think you're just going to be kind of sad, and one of your specs will get ignored, kind
You're
of,
like,
right?
I'm not
Like
as
whatever,
good
I'll
as-
probably play like first patch, current tuning. I would probably have 2 soul binds for subtlety and 1 for outlaw. Is kind of how I would have it set up, and I just wouldn't get to play assassination until 9.1 because I'll probably, you know what I mean? Like that's probably how that'll work. Which obviously not good from my perspective. But not like Legion where you got your first 4 legendaries and then you basically stopped getting legendaries. And if you didn't get any of the ones you wanted, you made a new guy. Like so it's going to be not quite to that extent. But yeah, it's still, I don't know. It's just sad to me. I just wish they would just let me have fun. You know what I mean?
Like, just unlock it, man. Right?
Yeah.
Okay, so in terms of balance, like, actually, here's an important question, because I know you played Rogue back in the day. You hadn't played much Rogue in BFA. You played a lot of Hunter, and then you played a lot of Warrior. Are you going Rogue for Shadowlands?
Assuming I don't have to tank, I am playing Rogue for sure.
Yeah.
I think it's going to be... I think Rogue is going to be the safest melee to just pick. If you care about Mythic Plus, I think it's, again, like, this is why, like, I didn't play Rogue until week 2 of BFA.
Yeah.
Week 2 of BFA was when it hit me. I was like, well, the DK plan isn't going to work. I'm going Rogue if I want to do dungeons. Like, that was just kind of... you adapt to it. And granted, I
you
love
played
that
DK
I went Rogue.
too. Yeah, you played DK melee for the majority of the time before
That
you
was-
played Hunter.
DK and Hunter is what I've played since Burning Crusade when I started playing the game. I started as Hunter. I played Hunter almost exclusively and then started playing a bit of DK in there. And then BFA is when I started picking up Rogue, picked up Windwalker for MDI, picked Hunter back up, eventually picked up Warrior. So, I don't know. BFA has been kind of an adventure for me, man.
You're
I've
like,
been all over
dude,
the place.
And that was like the unalt friendly grindy system stuff, man.
Yep,
You just
it was not enjoyable.
Yeah.
That was...
You've been all through it, dude.
Played a bunch of Demon Hunter too. There was a time in 8.3 or in 8.2 I was just like maining Vengeance Demon Hunter randomly.
Oh, really?
So
yeah,
been all over the place.
Yeah, I don't know if you remember. I was in Twitch Prime with you, and you guys carried me through Nyalotha. I literally had just got back to the game.
Yeah,
and they were like,
I remember you hit me up.
Yeah, they were like, we're doing heroic Nyalotha, and I was like, oh shoot, I guess I should do the raid. Literally not even looking at a single boss, like not even a single boss.
I think I was playing Hunter then.
Yeah, and I remember jumping in at the end, and I'm like, I wonder if anybody notices, and it's like pretty obvious that this guy doesn't know what he's doing.
It is what it is.
So thank you for carrying me through Nyalotha, by the way.
That was a good time, man.
Yeah.
That was I killed N'Zoth on Hunter before, so Proud Warrior.
Yep. Oh man, that's funny. So okay, so let's talk about balance, because I think balance is really interesting.
Okay.
So I think one, it's good. I'm glad to hear that you think Rogue is going to be a safe pick, because I'm probably going to roll Rogue.
I think you're chilling.
Yeah, I think I'm probably going to roll Rogue as main, and then I think I might do Boomkin as a secondary. I have a Demon Hunter that I was for a while going to go Rogue Demon Hunter because I heard that was the play, but I think Boomkin might be a safer bet, specifically if I ever want to get in a rating. But anyway, that's kind of a side point. The whole thing that I want to talk about is balance, because I think some of the design decisions that Blizzard's making here is kind of troubling. Specifically, all of the systems are incorporating at the start of the expansion.
Sure.
Which is a point that Tickle, on one of my previous episodes, Tickle this brought up, as he's mostly plays PvP but does a lot of other stuff too. Basically about how concerned he is because there's so many systems here. You know, one, it's a large, they're trying to do a lot. They're introducing an expansion.
They are.
They're introducing an expansion. And then on top of introducing all this new content, they're introducing multiple systems. Like they're starting with, covenants, conduits, the soulbinds, like all this stuff that is multiple.
And then legendaries.
And legendaries. Well. Yeah. Like, I mean, those are like 4 major systems that all affect balance. They're all tied to power, and they're multiplicative. If that makes sense.
They all come together to make stuff like, and you have to play a bit of beta before you start to figure out what's actually OP. Like Subtlety, for example, has a specific conduit that is scaling shadow damage, which when you look at it and you haven't played sub on beta, it's like, oh, okay, like that's a minor damage increase. And then you start to take a look at like how quickly that shadow damage is going to scale out of control. And it's like, what are they going to do when we get higher ranks of these conduits? Like, I don't know what they're going to do.
Because you rank your conduits up to like 15 or whatever. Like,
We still don't know exactly how that's going to function. They've said it's like item level based and stuff's going to drop the further into the expansion we get. Yeah. But I don't know. We don't know how soon we're going to be at max rank. Like if it's first patch or if it's going to be an expansion wide thing. But if we get there soon, that stuff's just going to scale wild. And it's going to be kind of like, because the point about the systems being tricky to balance is, I think, important to reference BFA too. When you think about the classes that performed well in both Raid and in Mythic Plus, it's often classes that had stackable, powerful Azerite traits.
Yes.
Right? Like classes that didn't end up, like that didn't win the Azerite trait lottery, just didn't do well for the entire expansion. That's something we saw in things like Subtlety Rogue, something we saw in things like Enhanced Shaman having like kind of weird sets of Azerite traits. Saw as well with the mage specs that weren't fire, that they didn't have like their blaster master. So there was no easy way to facilitate their scaling through the system that they put in, and they didn't really do much balancing of the Azerite traits. They did a really good job in 8.1. I think 8.1 was the best patch of BFA for that reason. Obviously Reaping and Battle of the Dazar'alor were great additions, but at the beginning of 8.1, they reworked a lot of Azerite traits, and they made bad ones good, and they toned the really good ones down a little bit. And classes that weren't doing well in Uldir kind of showed up and were able to perform, but then they just like stopped. Like they just didn't do any more balancing. So I don't know. I don't think that they're incapable of balancing stuff. I think they're really good at it when they put the effort in. I think they just got sidetracked by making more systems throughout BFA with like essences and stuff, and Azerite got pushed to the side, where if had 8.2 happened and had 8.3 happened and they did some Azerite trait tuning both of those patches, we probably would have had a way different landscape, and classes that were seemingly just like terrible for the whole expansion could have been very good. So we're hoping for that. Maybe they get that bonus, man, from implementing all the systems at the beginning. The rest of the expansion is just like, we're just balancing now. Like that's it. And maybe it turns out okay.
Like what's really interesting about this is, I mean, I feel like this is a shift in design philosophy with the game, and I do think that they need to take some risks at some point.
Sure, definitely.
But I think there's a question, like, obviously the game needs to change at some point. Like, games need to evolve. Like, that's the beauty of video games, is that it's not like soccer or traditional sports where it's like the rules of the game literally have not changed for hundreds of years. You know, like, the beauty of video games is that it can evolve and continue to shift. And World of Warcraft, you know, has been like a leader in that because it's been around for freaking forever. So
yeah, definitely.
You know, so things need to shift, and I do think this idea of systems is interesting, and I do think it makes it interesting. But there's also this element here where, you know, when you kind of look at meta and you kind of look at balance, and you're stacking, so many things on power, so many systems that are based on power of class and power of your character, and they're all on top of each other, I get nervous. I'm a little I'm not going to lie. I'm a little squirrely when it comes to Shadowlands release, because I feel like even within 8.3, which it's clear they just gave up. It's clear it just was like, we don't care. We're focusing on Shadowlands.
Yeah.
You know, like BFA is what it is. But it was pretty obvious that it was like, we're going to introduce this corruption system. And people are going to hate me, but I actually really enjoyed the Azerite system, other than I actually didn't think it was that bad, but I didn't play at the time when you couldn't change them. But the funny thing is, I didn't even really know you could change them until halfway through or whatever. I just farmed multiple sets. I was like, you know, the classic in me was just like, whatever, I'll just farm like multiple pieces. It doesn't matter. Like, I'll grind the heck out of this. I don't care. Like, but there's this element now where we have, like, you know, you've got talents, you've got abilities, you've got all this crap that you're trying to balance that's all based off of power. I'm a little nervous that it's going to come out and things are going to be so incredibly imbalanced, specifically because at the end of 8.3, it was like the corruption system in and of itself was so horrifically imbalanced that the meta shifted based on how much corruption you had.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
How well
like,
you scaled with it.
Yeah,
for sure.
There was like a time where like Fire Mage was like super good at the beginning because of the corruptions they were getting. Tanks at one point, warrior tanks and specifically because of Twilight Devastation, were doing insane amounts of damage. They became meta. And then as people started stacking more corruption, the meta shifted. Hunters all of a sudden became super popular, like
Yeah, well, especially once you could target on hunters, like being able to get the corruption you wanted on hunter was nuts.
Yeah, and I remember Rogue falling off for a bit. Until they gave us the vendor, and we were able to actually purchase the corruption that we needed. Which was stacking crit or whatever. So there's just, and same with Brewmaster, not being able to get versatile. So it was like all of these issues. All of these issues around this one system, and then they're like, releasing Shadowlands with like 5 systems. I'm like, I don't know, dude. Like, I'm a little sketched out right now, to be honest.
I'm just hoping they don't implement future systems and they just add stuff to the previous ones, and that lets them balance. And I'm personally of the opinion, I don't mind when stuff is busted. Like when there's stuff that's like busted OP, that's not a huge deal to me, as long as, one, if I need to, at the highest level, it's easy to reroll, and there's not a million hoops I have to jump through, which currently doesn't look like that. Or 2, there's frequent balance patches, which is like, neither of those things happen to BFA. But if one of them had happened, I would have been like, whatever, Mage is busted now, fine. What's going to be busted in a month? Rogue's busted now, fine. What's going to be busted in a month? But I think they have, like, at their core, they don't like doing that. That's what, like, they like to do their big balance changes with each patch rather than the middle of a patch.
Yeah.
So again, that's kind of like, the theme is, I think their systems put them in design holes.
Yes.
Like they make it more difficult for them to design stuff that's like works because of the parameters they put on themselves, right? Like they create these I guess boxes for themselves to design, which I don't know. Maybe they'll figure it out. I'm having fun on beta, obviously.
Yeah.
So it's not like Shadowlands isn't going to be fun. There's just going to be some frustrations along the way that we kind of hoped they would have fixed after BFA.
At least as content, right? Like at least as new content.
Yeah, I mean, the raid was sick from what I tested. I didn't get to see the last 2 bosses. I just did the normal when it was out. All the dungeons are sick. The dungeon bosses are sick. So, and classes feel good. Like that's a huge thing that we haven't really talked about, is ignoring covenant abilities, ignoring soulbinds, conduits, whatever. Most of the classes just feel good to play. Like I'm just like having a nice time, even without all the systems on top. So.
Well, that's awesome, though, because, I mean, I am encouraged to hear that and excited to hear that. That was one of the things that I think, I hope that's true, because I hope that they introduce the system. I hope they introduce this expansion with all of these systems, and then in future patches do class rework, for classes.
They're doing a lot of that already. Like a lot of class rework is starting to happen already.
Yeah.
Like fundamentally, Enhancement Shaman is much different in Dungeons. Enhance feels really fun to play. Shadow Priest got their rework. They started doing a little bit to Feral Druid. Even Subtlety, like, while it didn't get really reworked, it got shifted enough in the powers in different places for sub. So it seems like they are putting effort into classes. Obviously, Affliction Warlock plays a bit differently now with Malefic Rapture, and that's a huge boost to them. Not that Warlock really needed help, but it did need help in Mythic Plus, and this will help them out for sure. So they've definitely been paying attention to classes and figuring out how they can make them just function at a core better. And
when I jump back in the game, I actually came back to the game at the end of 8.2, so I took a considerable amount of time away. I played at the end of. I started playing at the end of BC. Played all the way through the Wrath of the Lich King. I skipped Mists of Pandaria, but I played Cataclysm and Warlords of Draenor, and then at the end of Warlords of Draenor, I left and didn't play Legion at all.
Okay.
So when I came back, I hadn't played Outlaw. Like Outlaw was not something I even knew. So it was combat when I played. I did Blackrock Foundry. I think was my last raid. Which was an awesome raid, by the way. But doing Blackrock Foundry and playing, and playing Outlaw, and then I did sub on some of those bosses too. But coming back and having this new spec to learn, there's so much to do. I loved it. I thought it was fantastic. Like the rework that they did there was so successful in my mind, and I'm still enjoying it. Like I am still having fun playing Outlaw. So there are elements there where I'm like, they have so many things that they could do that they have done well traditionally. That I kind of wish they would focus on sometimes instead of these systems, where instead of introducing all these power systems and locking us out of them, why don't they do more? Why don't they do more dungeons? Why don't they do more content? Why don't they do more class rework?
I don't know, man.
Like, I'm like, you guys are so good at this. Like, just do this, right?
Yeah.
Like,
yeah, just lean into their strengths instead of like their obvious weaknesses. Like every time they've tried to implement a new system since like there's definitely been a departure, right? You have like the first 3 expansions, and then you have what, Kata, Miss, and WAD. And then like this has been a new era since Legion. Like Legion and BFA, I consider just a different era of WoW. And since Legion, their implementation of systems has been very bad.
yes.
Their way of fixing their systems has usually been very good by the end of the expansion. And then when they find time in between, they're toying with their systems to make them right. The little changes they make to classes have typically been very good, and their dungeons and their raids have been awesome. So if they just stop doing the systems to begin with, and we're just like, let's make way more dungeons and raids and make the classes sick, like, I don't know. The game for me would be better. Not that I'm like super complaining about the state of the game in general, because I do think they end up at a place eventually. Like I've said this a lot. I preach this all the time. The last patch of Legion is the best the game has ever been. Like 7.3, I think, is the best patch of WoW ever, going back to 1.0 and vanilla. I don't think there's been a better patch, but it's because they opened up all the systems. Like you could play an alt instantly, and all the specs played amazing. Every class was fun to play. I was doing the raid on heroic on 10 of the 12 classes on like multiple specs just for fun. Like it wasn't even like, man, I can't wait to get gear on this dude. It was just like, yo, I got a new legendary. Let me go try this out in the raid. This is awesome. I love playing this. And then doing the Mage Tower challenges. Like, I guess you missed Legion, so they implemented single player challenges for each spec.
Yeah.
That you got like a unique weapon appearance for doing, and they were challenging, and they were all so like doing that was like a couple weeks of content of me just doing all 36 challenges on specs I'd not played from before, and like learning how to Pega through the healer challenges. And that was like, it was awesome because they just let you play stuff. And then their new trend in BFA has been to, we don't want you to play stuff. And it's like, man, just let me play all the classes.
Here's my question. Do you think Asmongold is right? Because Asmongold has this theory that like the higher ups as CEOs within Blizzard have this kind of idea that they need to introduce these systems, and then they close them off to people, and then slowly open them up as they demand. They intentionally grief people and then open them up so that they can elongate the life of the designs that they implement.
I don't want to go too into it, but my tinfoil hat is certainly on for that, and I do think that is accurate.
Yeah,
I think
know we're
just
getting
a very
conspiracy theory territory here, but
there's a large player base that plays the game for a month every patch and then leaves. Like there's a large casual player base that does that. And those people also buy the new store mounts because it's just like, oh, cool, this is like the new WoW thing and blah, 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 whatever. And if they can make the system bad and then make it magically way better a month later, you get an extra month or two out of those people, and maybe they buy another mount. Like I'm on board with that for sure. But we won't go too deep into that because I don't want to believe it is kind of what it is. You know what I mean? Like,
for sure.
I do, but I don't want to. Yeah. So.
Oh man, dude, there's just so much to talk about, man. We've already been talking for a while, but okay, so let's get to a couple other things here. Like we obviously covered systems and changes. How about gearing? What do you think about the weekly vault?
It owns.
Yeah,
I think the weekly vault is really sick. Mostly because so the way that it works is whatever. So there's 9 boxes. You fill out however many of those 9 boxes you want. Mm-hmm. It starts at like a low requirement to get the box. So doing 1 Mythic Plus dungeon gets your first slot open. Killing 3 bosses gets your first slot open. Or doing the conquest is, I don't know how to compare how much effort the conquest is for PvP because I haven't done like any of that on beta yet. But effectively, if you don't play the game at a level like whatever your main is, right? Like so say Mythic Plus is my main, that's my jam. And I'm doing the highest keys. And I'm going to do, okay, we have the imager. Cool.
Yeah.
So I'm going to do, and this has been changed recently for the Mythic Plus dungeons to 10 is the third one.
Okay, instead of 15, right?
Yeah. So whatever the breakpoint is, say it's plus 15 for the first patch. As long as I do 10 plus 15s, I'll get 3 choices there.
Yeah.
For all the max item level, and I can just pick which one I want. So now I feel less pressured to PvP or raid, because unless I'm doing it at the same level I'm playing Mythic Plus, the rewards aren't going to be as high anyway. So I don't have to spread myself and just play the game in every aspect at the highest level if that's not something I want to do. And it's also, what is interesting is, from the raid rewards, they're supposed to give raid drops, right?
Yeah.
So typically you have this thing where a lot of players that are heroic raiders will also pug the first 3 raid bosses every tier, right? Like on Mythic, they'll do the first 3 on Mythic, and that unlocks them another chance to get raid loot without clearing the raid on Mythic, because they're going to kill 3 Mythic bosses, and now they'll have a Mythic piece to choose from out of their cache. And I think that's sick. So I'm excited for this a lot. It's for the players at the very highest level, it's going to feel like a lot during the first 3 or 4 weeks, probably, because you're going to want to fill this out completely. But for most players, this is just, it's only going to be a benefit. Like, it's only going to be an improvement. I think it's really cool.
Yeah. I mean, I'm excited about it simply because it definitely feels like a better system than what they have in place. Like, this is a huge improvement. A huge improvement from
it's just choice.
From
choice
from what we're currently doing. And I honestly, unless it's like a ridiculous grind, I am never against systems that require somewhat of a grind. Like 10 Mythic pluses, like, for me, is not even that much. I don't even play the game that much. Like, I'll be honest.
I'm gonna do that anyway. That owns.
Like it's like I'm just getting rewarded for doing what I currently want to do, which is raise my IO. You know what I mean? Like, so, like, why not? So yeah, I'm excited about it. I know that they had some controversy, or at least some discussion, about changing drop rates in Mythic Plus. Have you heard about that?
Yeah, they did. The end of the cache is only, or end of dungeon at like whatever the base level is. So right now, base level on live is 15, and you get 3 pieces from 15, right?
Yeah.
On live, and then every key level above 15, you get a 40% chance for an extra piece. So every 3 dungeon levels. So at 18, you're guaranteed 4 pieces. Chance at 5. At plus 20, you're guaranteed 5 pieces, and so on and so forth. Gotcha. So the secondary effect still exists. It's just the base amount is just 1 piece. So at 15, you get 1 item instead of 3. But it still increases. Like, if you push higher keys, you still get the same increase. So at 18s, you'll get 2 pieces. At 20s, you'll get 3. I think it'll probably be annoying the first week or 2 of the patch when you're trying to get dungeon loot, and then after that, everybody will forget it's even a thing. So
do you think 15s are going to be doable at the
It might
release?
be 10s, because season 1 of BFA, it was 10s for the cache.
Yeah, I remember
the highest keys in BFA season 1 were 22s, was the very highest key done, and that was specific dungeons were doable on 22.
We're not like grinding the end of expansion, right, where people are doing like 30 keys, right? Like, the scale.
I would expect it to be 10.
Yeah, lower. So cool. And I mean, I'm sure they'll adjust that as needed, right? Like,
yep, that's usually, I mean, that's what they did in BFA. I think first 2 seasons were 10, and then 8.2 is when it bumped up to 15.
Okay. Cool. So, okay, so we're kind of covering a lot of different things in terms of gearing, systems.
Sure.
You know, how is it feeling for alts? I know you're playing a lot of rogues. Are you thinking that this is the alt-friendly expansion they're talking about, or do you think that it's going to be more of like a single class grind, multiple characters type thing?
I don't know yet. We'll see how quickly you're able to get renown. Renown is kind of like the time gatey stuff, and they've said it's not going to be gated for alts. So they've said that, like, once you gain the renown on your main, when your next character, you'll be able to catch up to whatever the current level is. Kind of like corruption resistance is right now, where if, like, you grind, you can catch your corruption resistance all the way up instantly. You just have to grind a little bit, right?
Which you have 2 dailies from your Covenant house that reward
2
this.
weeklies. 2 weeklies.
Which this is a currency, by the way, for people watching. Renown is kind of like it's essentially like a currency that you are farming from your.
It's just There's 2 parts of it. There's anima power and renown. Renown is just the number, like your rank of renown you just get by playing through the campaign.
Yeah.
And as you get more renown, so each week you get your 2 renown from your weeklies, and then you'll hit breakpoints, and that'll unlock more of the campaign. Kind of like the class halls worked in Legion, where you're kind of time gated, and eventually you saw more of the story, and then you got renown up. And then anima power is kind of what you farm from world quests, which there are not a lot of anymore. It's not a lot of pressure to do world quests. There's like maybe 4 per continent. Most of them aren't worth doing. and that helps you increase your renown and progress your covenant. So it seems not very grindy from that perspective, which is good.
Yeah.
And then you do 2 Torghast clears a week, which is not a lot.
How long does that take? How long does a Torghast clear take?
It's about a half an hour. It's pretty similar to Visions.
Okay.
Yeah, it's similar to Visions, and each week there will be 2 wings. There's 6 different wings that can be open. Right now on beta, it's refreshing every day just for testing purposes.
Yeah.
But those will shift every week. So you just have to clear 1 each week, and that gets you your Soul Ash, which is the currency for legendaries.
It's essentially the assaults, but fun.
Yeah. Torghast has been fun. I could see. I don't see myself specifically doing Torghast for fun, but I do see myself like not hating being in Torghast and like, all right, this is fine for like my half an hour chore for the week. Like this is a good time.
Does it feel obnoxious? Like I think inherently the system seems much better than Visions because personally I liked Visions at first. And then the more that I grinded them, I was like, holy crap, these affixes, or whatever you want to call them, are ridiculously annoying. Like the most annoying thing I've ever experienced in my entire life.
Yeah.
Is it better?
Yeah, well, I think that's the thing is once you get a bit of gear and your character's like caught up in the patch, you kind of just like are walking through Torghast and just enjoying your OP abilities. And there's nothing that's just like, man, you wanted to hold W instead of stopping while this wall of dudes appeared. Like, I want to continue playing the game. I don't want to wait for this mechanic. Torghast, it's, I don't know. It's just like you just casually walk through it and you either get OP or like maybe you low roll some of the abilities and you're not super overpowered, but it's like fine either way.
Yeah. Like I will never advocate for them to ever introduce anything like Scorch Feet in the video game ever again.
Yeah,
like,
please no. We don't need that.
Ever again.
We don't need any of those affixes, man.
Yes.
Like they were all so bad.
Or specifically any like loss of control of your character effect that you cannot control and that there's no inherent way to play around.
That sounds good.
Like
don't put those in anywhere.
Yes, we're done. Thanks. We experienced that. It was interesting. We're done, right?
Yeah.
Like
yep.
So, yeah. Well, I'm really excited for Shadowlands. Do you think that it's getting close? Like, do you think that...
I think we are, I want to say just over 2 months out.
Okay.
Is what my guess would be. I think
September,
early to
October,
middle of November.
Early
to middle of November, I think, will be it.
Okay.
I hope that's it. There's still some things they have to work out. Like, for example, 50% of the rogue legendaries are bugged in some way where they either don't work or they work in a way that they're not supposed to, and it's over half of them. So I don't, you know what I mean? That's not like, I don't want to see pre-patch drop in. It's like, man, I don't even know what legendary I'm making because I can't even use half of them. They don't work right now. So, so we'll see. I don't know how the other classes are. It feels like rogue specifically is like 1 to 2 builds behind, which is fine. Okay. That's not, a lot of the rogue community is like up in arms about that, but whatever, man. Rogue is chilling as a base class. Like it just works. So if we're behind on that stuff, I think it's okay as long as it gets fleshed out by release. So I think about 2 months, maybe a little bit more.
Okay, nice. I mean, I hope so. I'm really excited for it. I was even going to take off work to grind it, so we'll see.
Hell yeah.
Yeah, man. I like whenever new expansions hit, it's kind of like, oh, I'm not feeling good today, guys. Sorry.
Yeah, sorry.
I think I got the Rona. I need to take 2 weeks and, you know.
Yeah, I got a quarantine.
Yeah.
Oh, you just take a flight. Just just drive somewhere far away.
Yeah.
Fly back and be like, I got a quarantine. I just took a flight back home. I'm sorry. Was visiting my grandmother. I can't come to work. Like easy.
Yeah, there you go, man. That's like next level strats right there.
Yeah.
But yeah. Okay, well, cool. Guys in chat, if you have any questions, you know, we're going to wrap up here. So if you have questions you want to answer, go ahead and ask them and we'll try and read through them. So, you know, Undad, I appreciate you coming on and kind of just letting us, you know, hear about everything you've been testing and what you're doing. And, you know, guys, definitely stay tuned for what he'll be doing. You're going on Sloot Bags talk. There's like a show tomorrow or something. Is it tomorrow? When is
tomorrow?
That?
It is 3 Eastern time, 3 p.m. Eastern time tomorrow. So in the afternoon.
Cool.
Going on with 2 other rogues, Kojiyama and Mistler from the Rogue Discord Ravenholt, and we're just gonna. Sloot's been doing shows on all the classes so far. I think he started with like the black sheep classes that haven't had any love forever, like monk and feral druid and stuff like that. And I guess subtlety rogue falls into that after BFA, so he's trying to get rogues on, and we're gonna just talk about rogue.
Yeah, cool. So definitely check that out, guys, in chat. And then also you're gonna be casting for Keystone Masters. When's that coming up?
Correct. It is September. What is the date? September 19th and 20th, a Saturday and Sunday. So that's about 3 weeks out, 4 weeks out. But time trials for that are starting soon. Signups just closed today. So the competitors should be getting Tournament Realm relatively soon. And then they get to start practicing for their time trial runs. And then, yeah, there you go.
Cool. We got one question coming in. It says, have you watched the Infectious video put out today, and are you in general agreement as to his thoughts on the current yet broken in many places state of the class? That's from Baktosh Live.
I did not watch. I was actually a friend sent it to me, but I did not get a chance to watch the video yet. Trying to think what he might have said. Current yet broken in many places state of the class. I mean, if he's implying that Rogue feels good, even though everything's kind of busted and not functioning yet, I would echo that. Rogue feels really good, and it's only going to feel better when they fix everything. Except Sub might feel a little bit worse. They're abusing a ridiculously broken legendary right now.
Okay.
That is going to get tuned. I am almost certain, especially after I talk about it on Sloot's channel tomorrow. I'm getting that legendary nerfed. I'm sorry, Sub Rogues. It's going to happen. But yeah, I think I probably agree.
Yeah. I know there was a question earlier about Covenant choice. Necrolord, is that the play for Rogues right now with the Bone Spike?
Currently, yeah, because it's the only one that like fully works.
Yeah.
Kyrian is. I could go for like 20 minutes about how awkward Kyrian is, but I don't intend to ever play Kyrian until they change the ability.
Which one is
Slaughter
Kyrian?
Poison? Kyrian is the one that generates 3 combo points, and then it anima charges one of your combo points to make it so when you land. So it has a chance. It basically empowers combo point 2, 3, or 4. And it makes it so if you spend that, if you specifically land on that combo point and then use a finisher, it acts as if you spent 7 combo points. But catch me landing on combo point 2 randomly. Like what? Weird. It's just like there's too many ways for all 3 specs to not be able to land on the correct combo point that I don't know. That ability was designed by a developer that has not played Rogue for a long time. That's the only that's it. There's no other way to describe it.
That sounds super awkward.
It might be okay, but it's just not. No, you're not gonna have any fun playing it. That's the way I'm looking at it. Or you just ignore it and hope you land on the combo point randomly. So it's like, I don't know. It doesn't play like a Rogue should play. Slaughter Poison, which is the Venthyr Covenant, currently is basically nothing for Outlaw and Sub because we can't spread poisons in AoE. They gave us poisons back, but there's no way for us to spread the poison. And the whole Covenant ability is you have this poison. And
so it's essentially just like a little bit of extra damage. Is that all it is?
It's a little bit of extra single target damage, specifically single target. It does nothing in AoE.
Oh my gosh.
So hopefully they fix that. And then Night Fae's ability is you put a poison on the target. At the end of the poison, it pops for a big amount of damage, and you vanish. Which with the new legendaries, that'll be really cool. Okay. But currently, the pop damage at the end, which is like 60 to 70% of the damage the ability is supposed to do, does no damage. So that doesn't work right now. Yeah. Yeah. So when everything is worked out, you'll probably have choices of 3. I think Venthyr actually has a lot of potential. They just haven't made it do anything yet.
Yeah.
So we'll see what happens there. Necro is definitely the play right now. But to answer the original question, after our long-winded journey through all the covenants.
Yeah. I mean, that's good. That's good information to know, though. Like, it's like just about what's feeling good and what feels kind of weird and what feels awkward. I had a quick question with the change that they made to roll the bones, as well as the change adding in slice and dice. How is that feeling with Outlaw? Does that feel weird?
It's okay. I think generally the feeling, I was prepping on for the show tomorrow, where we'll be talking about Rogue a lot. And I think generally the way that the community is going to feel is at the highest level, I think players will either feel negatively or indifferent about the change. And then at like lower or middling levels, I think people will feel indifferent or slightly positive. It's just like, it's nothing, basically.
Yeah.
It's you hit roll the bones on cooldown pretty much, and you keep slice and dice up now instead.
Like,
that's it.
The one thing that okay, so this is an interesting discussion point. And after this, we'll probably let you go because I don't want to keep you too long. I appreciate your time. So, but with Roll the Bones, it's like the interesting thing to me, at least in my opinion, with Roll the Bones was the fact that it was a decision that you would make, and that the distinction between high level rogue players and mediocre rogue players is knowing when you need to refresh that or re-roll. I totally agree. And now it's kind of like one of those things where it's like you can't play it wrong, It's like you just smash buttons. It's almost like they dumbed it down a little bit, and that does bother me somewhat because I thought that class was just so ingenious because they allowed you to have difficult decision making in the midst of doing mechanics,
Yeah, I think BFA Outlaw was one of like the clear winners of BFA as far as like spec design went.
Yeah.
And I do miss having control over, okay, this pack is kind of dying. My damage is not as important as it was earlier on. Let me start rolling to get something up for the next pack, which is dangerous. Yeah. Or like on bosses where it's like, okay, here's a damage amp phase. Let me make sure I have a full buff going in. As soon as the damage amp phase hits, even if I didn't quite land on what I wanted to, it's just time to go. Like I'm taking this buff and make the best of it. Like there's a lot of little intricacies that you can min-max with the previous system that are just gone, which is why I made the distinction. I think high level players will either not like it or feel whatever. And like middling tier players will feel like, oh, okay, this is one less thing to like cloud my mind. I can just kind of have fun and play my game.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I'm pretty indifferent about it the more I play with it. I was taken aback at first, but it feels okay.
It feels all right. Interesting.
Yeah. Outlaw in general just like feels good enough. I think that.
Yeah.
I don't think they could break the spec really. Like it just flows.
Yeah.
Really nice. So.
And the way Slice and Dice works with it is that it auto refreshes based on a proc, right?
If so Slice and Dice is Grand Melee essentially. It's just 50% attack speed. So the way they change Grand Melee is when you spend combo points while Grand Melee's up, you add duration to your Slice and Dice now.
Oh, that's right. So it goes from like
what the change was.
15 seconds to like, wasn't it like 45 or a minute or something? Like it's this crazy long buff.
It just proportionally keeps adding. It just every time you spend combo, I've gotten up to like 2 minute long Slice and Dices.
Weird.
From like rolling Grand Melee twice in a row.
Oh, interesting.
Because you could get back-to-back back-to-back Grand Melees and just never hit Slice and Dice. Just have it up forever.
Yeah.
So it's just that's slightly different. Everything else basically functions the same. Class is just good, man. Like the core of Outlaw is just good. Same for Sub, same for Assassination. Like they just have like, they just work. They're just like good specs.
Yeah. Yeah. Cool, man. Hey, well, thank you so much for coming on the show, dude, and just taking the time to come and talk some about Rogue specifically and about Mythic Plus in general, just about how, some of that has been going. I appreciate, your input and willingness to come on. So
thanks for having me, man. I had a blast. I've been wanting to do this kind of thing for a while. So
yeah,
getting the invite owns.
And thank you, everyone, for attending. We do MOLECAST every Monday night, 9 p.m. Eastern. Next week we'll be here as well. I am planning some shows in the background, so just stay tuned for that. Follow UndadTV. You're on Twitch, on Twitter, and YouTube. Do you want to plug yourself?
Twitch, Twitter, and then YouTube. I'm Sad Dad.
I did see that.
I haven't changed it. I'm too like boomer to know how to change anything, and I'm not like partnered or anything on YouTube, so I don't even know if I can. Like maybe I can change that. I don't know how YouTube works, man. I just upload stuff.
Yeah.
And like paint pictures for my thumbnails.
Dude, I love it. I was looking at your YouTube channel. I was like, dude, I love that he just like took his mouse and drew the title on it. I was like, that's so perfect, man.
Yeah, that's my niche, man. I'm just a scuffed guy.
That's the way to be, though. So, yeah. All right, man. Well, hey, thank you so much for your time, dude. We'll have to play sometime. Add me on BNet. It's the Monty Mole. I think it's 1452. So
I'll get you, dude. You got once you're on beta, we'll game. I'm not logging on to live, but I will see you on beta when you get it.
All right. Well, if anyone from Blizzard is watching, dear God, please give me beta access. The Monty Mole 1452. Please, Ian, somebody, whoever's there, give me beta access, please. So, Well, all right, buddy. I will catch you later, man.
All right, thanks again, man. Have a good night.
All right,
see
we'll
you guys.
see you.